I mean, women are supposed to be goddesses, like in a country apparently where, but the worst kind of scums are allowed to let free on social media, and big tech is hugely responsible for enabling this and platforming this.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Manasa, and welcome to another episode of Tech Breakdown. There are many different countries that I speak and write about generally. And on the show, we have discussed the information ecosystem of a few different countries. But today's episode is a little extra special because I'm going to talk about home. Well, at least one of my homes. We are going to look at India's social media landscape. And so far, we looked at countries where the story was of a big bad world of big tech and the inadequacies of various governments, including ignorant and opportunistic failures on parts of different states. But today, we are looking at a country where big tech is not the only bully. The Indian government is also a bully, and it's the story of two bullies who actually don't clash with each other much. They rather collude to boost each other's powers. But these bullies together threaten an entire citizenry and threaten an entire democratic system. And to speak about this, I have with me someone who has personally faced the worst of social media and also, sadly, the worst of the Indian government. And yet she fights on. I have with me Rana Ayyub. Rana is an investigative journalist, global opinions contributing writer with the Washington Post. Rana is perhaps one of the most controversial journalistic figures in India today, but the sad part is she hasn't been saying anything very controversial. She speaks about an intolerant India that she lives in, and it's a reality that is quite visible and obvious to many of us who are not blinded by jingoistic sentiments at this point. And Rana has received several awards and recognitions for her journalism, and sadly, she has also been on less fortunate lists, on the lists of journalists most under threat around the world. Rana, difficult times, especially for you professionally and personally, given the state of things in the country. It's such a pleasure to speak to you and share this conversation. Thanks so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure, Mansa. A lot of times when when somebody says, "Oh, she's a controversial journalist," I'm like, "Oh my God, I wish there was one controversy which I was generated by me." It's like, it's a thing, right? Where when you speak your truth, and the government reacts, we end up becoming controversial. I just hope we were normal journalists going about doing our work.
Like I mentioned briefly in my introduction, for your work, for your criticisms of the Indian government and of Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister and face of the national ruling party in India, you have faced a lot of threats, to put it very lightly. And it's a rather grim space to begin, I admit, but people need to know how bad it is. And so can you tell us about your experiences with online harassment and how social media has been weaponized against you and several other voices of dissent in the country?
I'm glad you asked that, Mansa. In fact, yesterday or day before yesterday, I tagged Mumbai police saying there is a man who's telling me that if he sees me, he's going to chop me into many pieces and shed my blood. So I'm tagging police, and this is a guy who on his Instagram platform is a musician, must be around 17, 18 years old, with massive following, and he feels emboldened enough that in my comments he's telling me about the ways in which he will murder me. So I take his thing, I put it on my Twitter saying Mumbai police, they don't reach out, they don't react. This guy then sends me a DM saying, "Oh, I saw you tweeted to Mumbai police. This fear is good. This fear of us is good." And I just felt it was like a dystopian country. And then I realized there were people who were telling me in my inbox on the various ways in which they will rape me. Right. And this is happening not in my inbox. I mean, what they do in my inbox is beyond words, it's unspeakable. The ways they fantasize about gang raping me and mutilating my body. And I have filed some 7 cases with Mumbai police and nothing has ever happened. But the brazenness with which these are not bots, these are people with living, breathing profiles, their employers on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, explicit threats. This is my lived reality. And what have I done to deserve this? I speak a truth which is unpalatable. I speak a truth which is unvarnished. I speak a truth which is making people uncomfortable. And one of the only reasons, if you see all the tweets and the threats directed at me, they're gendered, sexist, Islamophobic, and the fact that I'm a critic of the government. So everything comes together. Like they when they refer to me, they refer to me as BB or jihadi, we will fuck you, right? That kind of word, that kind of terminology, right? So it's an intersection of your religion and your gender and what you do in life and the kind of work that you do. How dare you, being a Muslim woman, speak up? How dare you have a voice? Um, so this is besides the multiple cases that I face when I come back to my social media. This is another reality. So it's a grim picture, and it's about a country where women are treated as goddesses, right? I mean, women are supposed to be goddesses, like in a country apparently where, but the worst kind of scums are allowed to let free on social media, and big tech is hugely responsible for enabling this and platforming this.
What would you point is the main sort of crux of the issue? Because have you seen it grow and increase as the years have gone by? Is it that the government has given more legitimacy for it to be spoken out more publicly?
There is a Twitter handle of the BJP, the ruling party from Karnataka. I tweeted something and they said, "Dear Jihadi." That's the ruling party's Twitter handle. So what do I say about the government? It's like the BJP Karnataka has said, "Dear," they start the tweet reacting to me as "Dear Jihadi." So after that, the rest follows. This is the government's stated line. That's how they react to me. They call me BB. Why don't you go to Pakistan? This is the language of the ruling ministers of the ruling government. If you have so much problem here, why don't you go to Pakistan? But as far as the hate is concerned, as far as social media impunity is concerned, as far as tech being an enabler of fascism in the country, I think over the last couple of years, especially in the last 3 years, there has been a phenomenal rise in the spread of hate in India using social media platforms, using messaging apps, WhatsApp, Instagram. These have become like platforms where you can express your hate. In fact, I'm just writing a piece for the Washington Post about how Hindu vigilantes who are lynch mobs, who lynch people, are getting are getting silver buttons from YouTube because they have massive subscribers, right? And it's an irony. And this is how big tech has in a way flourished. People for this, there is a Hindu vigilante who basically takes videos of dragging Muslim traders and then uploads it on his YouTube, right? And it gets massive hits. And then he gets a button from YouTube. And that's the reality of big tech. And that's a reality of present day India, right? That the hate that you see against the minority community is largely because of the misinformation spread on big tech.
Hmm. I don't think you know this, or I'm not sure, but I came close to interviewing you once before, and you were supposed to visit London for an event that was being organized by the International Centre for Journalists, ICFJ,
Right,
and I was
right.
supposed to do an interview with you for the Citizens, the nonprofit I work for. I was preparing my list of questions, and I received a message from a colleague saying you were stopped from flying at Mumbai airport. And you were not the first. Many other critics of the Indian government have been stopped. And might I add, for anyone listening, that the Delhi High Court did allow Rana to fly the week after and said that the enforcement directorate that had stopped her from flying had done so, and I quote, despite absence of any precondition necessitating such a measure. Stopping you from flying to international conferences and forums has just been one tactic in the larger toolkit of crushing dissent. Could you tell us a bit more in detail about the kind of government machinery specifically that is deployed online to target critics like you?
I mean, I'll give you an example. The chief minister of Assam, one of the most crucial states for the BJP from the northeastern state, put out a tweet. When Barack Obama gave an interview about about what's happening in India. So he put out a tweet saying, "We have enough Hussein Obamas in India to take care of." It's not even a dog whistle. It's as brazen hate language as it gets. He also puts out a tweet saying mere Muslimans, a reference to Muslims, are responsible for price rise. This is how the ruling party is using platforms in India to spread disinformation and misinformation, and hate against people it believes. I mean, every time I give a speech or a lecture, I was at the Nobel Prize, I was at the UN, I trend on Twitter because they will pick up bits of my pieces from the conversation, put it out of context, share it on Twitter, and it will trend on Twitter as Rana defaming India. So, and kind of that I'm being seditious, that I'm trying to defame India, that I'm trying to bring infamy to India. So I think that's a pattern that I have noticed over the last couple of years that has become, that has, so every time I speak, I'm like, I hope I don't start trending on Twitter tomorrow, because it's scary. Because it's not, I can't tell you what it is like to trend on Twitter with the worst of images of yours and your personal space. There is an image of mine, um, from a beach in Goa. I was at a beach with my friend and sipping my mocktail. And so it is pretty well known because as a Muslim, I'm a teetotaler, right? So what they have used is, there's a picture of me in a black dress, a slinky black dress. I'm on a beach. And because I've been advocating for the women's right to wear the hijab, because there's an attack on hijab ban, there's a hijab ban in India that the government tried to introduce. And they were silencing hijabi women. They were stopping them from going to school. Now, I spoke about the choice of those women to wear the hijab and that heckling needs to stop. So they are using that image. I can't tell you, I think it must have been shared at least 100,000 times on social media, that here is a woman who wants hijab for a Muslim woman, but look at her wearing these beach clothes and drinking alcohol. Now I can say on Twitter that it's not alcohol, it's a virgin mojito. But the thing is, do they care? Even if I was having a diet coke, they would say she's having cocaine, whatever it is. That's how they kind of change. And imagine that image floating on WhatsApp on so many Indian households. And and it's just like that becomes your reality. Then they say, see, she's a hypocrite. She's asking for a Muslim woman and the right to wear the hijab, but at the same time, wearing a beach cloth, not realizing that the essence of my conversation is consent. Do not tell women what to wear. A woman can choose to wear a hijab, a woman can choose to wear a swimsuit. It's her prerogative. But that's how toxic it is. That's how toxic it is when they pick up my niece's image from my Instagram and saying, my niece is 15 years old. You're sharing it on social media. There is this anonymous handle who puts out a tweet that Rana Ayyub's father is sitting in Germany drunk soliciting prostitutes, right? My father has never left India except once in his life, for that too for Hajj in Saudi Arabia. A pious man. And then the BJP spokesperson quote tweets that and says the colorful life of Rana Ayyub's father. Till today, he has not deleted the tweet. That's how misinformation and hate is used to target journalists who are critical of the government. That's how hate is being used. What did they do when they morphed my image on a porn video? What did they do when they constructed a story of me sleeping with officials to get my story? What did they do when they ran a hashtag Rana Ayyub sex CD? What were they trying to do? They were trying to muddy the waters about a woman's character. Because in a country like India, where there's so much virtue placed on a woman's character, the moment you kind of muddy the waters a bit, it's like, oh, she's after this, she's loose character. That's how you do it. That's how you play the game. You kind of say she's a loose woman, right? You don't believe her story. So that's how it happens on multiple levels.
But it's the more shocking bits of it is the kind of legitimacy that's given to acts like this. Just why would you allow a woman's private pictures from a holiday being circulated through accounts, and also underage girls' pictures circulated and not do anything about it? Just says a lot in itself, that how the toxicity of social media is just found okay, right?
And now Twitter is apparently, now I heard the news that Twitter is now trying to introduce a policy where you cannot block tweets. I mean, it's like, well, you can spread hate about me, but I don't have the right to block you. You can abuse me. Twitter withheld my account, and Elon Musk is a free speech absolutist. But I shared a video of this railway police constable shooting down 3 Muslims on a train, and Twitter withheld my tweet in India at the request of the Indian government. So you can do all the atrocities that you want, but we will not allow you to speak about the atrocities on social media.
Mm.
Right? I mean, and this is like when you spoke about me being unable to leave the country, it's like one of the many tactics. I mean, and the irony is they stopped me at the airport from leaving to London when I was going to speak about press freedom, freedom of expression. The irony is not lost on anyone, right? And more than anything else, we are the world's largest democracy.
Yeah, I just want to go quickly to that point about where you made that your Twitter account was withheld, because it's an important one. Because your Twitter account was essentially withheld, if I'm not wrong, based on a law that's called the IT Amendment Rules Act 2023. Is that right?
Yes, under the Information Technology Act, my tweets were withheld. My
Right.
tweets were withheld. Now the government has invoked arbitrary powers, not just for me, but also for the government invoked arbitrary powers to remove the links to the BBC documentary.
Mm.
Right, all the links to the BBC documentary. Emergency powers were used and invoked, citing the IT Act. Right, this is the Information Technology Act does not apply to BJP spokesperson who spread fake news, but Information Technology Act applies to journalists who are speaking the truth on social media. So there is a brazen hypocrisy there.
So basically, the for anyone listening, the IT Act, IT Rules Act in India is sort of a new social media law that essentially gives the government, union government, powers to give the powers of defining fake news to a fact check unit, and this fact checking unit falls under the union government itself and is going to be the arbitrator of what truth and what fake news is. So the government essentially is dictating and controlling any news about itself, right? And this was the law that was used to silence Rana. Has been the law that's being used to silence a lot of dissent that is inconvenient to the government. And do you think this is a good way forward, and this is the direction that legislation towards social media companies should happen in India?
See, the fact that the government of the day, whose own members have used social media to amplify fake news, the moment that government of the day becomes the arbiter of deciding what is fake news, that is the ultimate demise of the truth and facts as they are. On one hand, you have publications and fact-checking websites. On the other hand, you have the government and many of its spokespersons and many of the right-wing machinery spreading propaganda and fake news. But then the government decides, hey, the fact-check news is actually propaganda, but this is not propaganda. So we are literally, this government being the arbiter of fake news is the government being the arbiter of deciding what is right and what is wrong and what is the truth. The government now decides what is truth in this country. I mean, I'll give you a small example. So when the deputy leader of the Nobel Prize Committee was in India, there was a fake news that said that he had said that Narendra Modi was the front runner for the Nobel Peace Prize. Now, there can be no such thing because the Nobel Committee does not announce these things, right? It's right on the Nobel website. Now, news channels ran it as a headline. BJP spokespersons ran it as their tweet, moment of glory for India. Members of the government, their children, television channels, everybody, Twitter headlines was trending on Twitter. Till such time that the guy, the deputy leader of the Nobel Peace Prize, had to put out a statement saying this is fake news. I didn't say any such thing. Can you imagine the scale at which it is happening? Now, by the time he fact-checked this news had been viral in India. Now, for the average person in a rural village who got this on his WhatsApp forward, the truth remains that Narendra Modi is a front runner for the Nobel Peace Prize. He does not know whether the news is fact-checked or not. He knows this is what he got in his WhatsApp forward. So imagine an IT Act now, which comes in and becoming the arbiter of fake news. What happens to the truth? The truth is the ultimate casualty in this.
I mean, you spoke a little about this a few months ago. You were at the Nobel Prize Summit. You were actually, even though Modi wasn't a front runner, you were at the Nobel Prize Summit for Truth, Trust, and Hope. And you said misinformation threatens to be the new true information, and it aids and enables the most anti-democratic values. What do we do, Rana? What way do you see out of this? Because we've got digital spaces pushing hate content because it's commercially better for them because they make a lot of money. And then you've got an authoritarian government that's benefiting from pushing of this hatred and essentially doesn't do anything about it and rather also promotes this kind of behavior. And then you've got a section of population that is also in agreement with such Hindu nationalistic sentiments or is indifferent. So how do we reach them and how do we fight this fight?
I wish I had a simple, hopeful, optimistic answer for this, because I have been looking for that piece of optimism. And honestly, and I can say this hand to my heart, that I've never felt more cynical about the situation. If somebody asks me what is the solution, I'm like, if you have one, give it to me, because I don't see it. I do know that there are people who are fighting against it. I do know that civil rights activists and student activists have been jailed behind bars for protesting. I do know that India's central agencies are being unleashed on critics and opposition. I do know that we have a man who's using every trick in the authoritarian playbook to unleash on citizens of this country. I do know that there is an attack on minorities, which could probably lead to an ethnic cleansing of the Muslim minority in India. But if you tell me what if there is hope, I'd see none. I see none, because we have a mainstream media in India. We have television channels who have frustrated the kind of content that we witness on our mainstream platforms is nauseating. I do know that um, every voice who speaks is now under the lens of suspicion, and we could get a brown envelope with a court summon any day, right? All of us are doing that. And I do know that tech companies are going to do absolutely nothing, in fact, enabling Mr. Modi and his government. I do know that Elon Musk was in America when Modi was in America, and he met him and he said he wants to bring a Tesla plant to India, and he's working towards it. Does that give me hope? I am looking for hope. I'm really looking for hope in the most grim time, as India hosts the G20 summit next month and world leaders are going to be here. But what is the future of disinformation and misinformation, or civil liberties, of online harassment, offline harassment? None of us seem to have a solution. The solution could be the people of this country coming together and fighting it. But when the people of this country are a majority, are either looking the other way, some seem to be jaundiced by the language of hate. Um, I am looking for semblance of hope which does not exist.
Hmm. Where does that leave us? It's just, I was looking also at the case of Manipur, right? So for anyone, Manipur is a state, beautiful state in India, and has been mired by a lot of conflict recently. And since May 4th, I think the Indian government kind of pushed an internet shutdown in Manipur. And stories that should have hit headlines months ago angered people, where people should have demanded more accountability from the government, where are just coming out now, and that too very slowly. And in fact, the prime minister of the country he felt compelled to only speak about it rather very briefly after a video of an horrific rape incident from Manipur went viral on social media 3 months from when the incident actually took place. So like you said, we have a kind of complicity with the mainstream, which is not reporting it. And now the essentially a government that's exercising so much control over social media that it has imposed an internet shutdown, right? Don't we have a conundrum in our hands of two really bad players and we being stuck in the middle?
It is. I mean, yesterday there was a news that India is among the 20 countries which have been labeled as tech authoritarianism. Because we have seen the maximum number of internet shutdowns anywhere in the world. Kashmir has been seeing internet shutdowns almost on every occasion. Manipur, when the first occasion of ethnic cleansing and reports of ethnic conflict started coming in, there was internet shutdown. The video of the 4 women who are stripped naked and are being molested on the streets came 60 days, 6 or more than 6 weeks after the incident happened. Why? Because there was an internet shutdown. God knows what was happening while the internet was shut down. God knows what were the atrocities happening. God knows how many churches were burning. God knows how many innocents were being killed. So you do not want to fix the solution. You do not want, the Prime Minister of India was only compelled to speak in one line about what happened, not without doing his whataboutery, saying, oh, but it also happens in other part of the world, right? You do not want to act on it, but you also don't want others to know about it, right? You choose to tell us what we must see, and you must block what you do not want us to see. And you must block Twitter handles, and you must block videos that you believe will disrupt the country. That's there is this is the worst kind of authoritarianism that one can ever see, the internet authoritarianism, the tech authoritarianism. And no wonder we are on that list, because had it had we had internet in Manipur on the day this ethnic exercise, this conflict began, probably we could have done better. I mean, the fact that the mainstream media was only scratching the surface of Manipur, that everybody sprung into action only when the video came in. Everybody knew what was happening, but everybody was busy reporting of Modi being given the highest honor in the US, Modi going to this summit, Modi going to that summit. For heaven's sake, Manipur was right there. As it is, we have our own prejudices when it comes to the northeastern states of India, because it's not, according to us, it's not mainstream India. But there is a massive prejudice at work, which the mainstream media looked away from. And thankfully, journalists who were responsible enough were reporting. But I think this censorship, this internet censorship, is probably one of the biggest problems that this country is facing.
And why do you think big tech companies comply so much? And is it, do you see it as a purely commercial move? And what do you think should be done on the part of big tech, given how bad the situation is?
I mean, for the big tech, India is a massive market. In a country of 1.4 billion people, we have past China in terms of population, right? In a country which has some of the most skilled tech people, it has a country which is providing skilled labor to the rest of the world. India is a massive market. India is a growing economy. How can you then go against the diktats of the ruling government, right? So the big tech, it's not that big tech has no morals in country where it chooses not to display morals. Big tech has selective morals in selective countries. That's what I say about them. These are people with zero morals. These are people with zero accountability. These are people who can lead to an ethnic cleansing in Myanmar of the Rohingyas through the hate that was spread on social media. These are people who are absolutely okay with misinformation in the Philippines, as long as it yields them profit. There's no moral compass we're talking about. At the end of the day, money and power dictates everything else. So what if a few thousand lives are lost in the process? Are we really talking about a moral compass? I don't think big tech has a moral compass. And yes, they will have their oversight boards, and they will have blah, blah, blah. We all know how these oversight boards work.
Yeah. But it's not just in India's case. It's not just that the big tech is looking away. It's also colluding actively, in the sense that there have been so many reports of connections between BJP leaders, BJP allies, and people working in Facebook, right? Essentially, even if you're a commercial company that has more moral compass or political leaning, so to speak, why would you then collude with a government in power that's trying to oppress a certain minority, right?
I mean, look at over the past, there have been exposés of how Facebook employees have themselves been a part of the problem. They're literally taking diktats from members of the government. Elon Musk otherwise is a free speech absolutist, and he will allow Kanye West and Trump and their accounts to be reinstated. But in India, he will have absolutely no ethical issues with blocking internet links on Twitter. He will have absolutely no issues. So, I mean, so this is collusion. This is complicity. This is not just looking away. This is what complicity looks like. That, I mean, there's not a day that goes by that I get an email from Twitter that we have just received a communication from the government of India, so we are withholding your account, but you are well within your right to file a case, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, sure. How many cases are we supposed to? We are not supposed to fight those cases. You are supposed to do that. Big tech is supposed to be the bulwark against this and say, no, we are not going to censor this. Unless it's a provocative hate speech, which actually goes unchecked. Provocative hate speech, which should actually be censored, which is taking lives, which is leading to lynchings on the street, is allowed unabated, uncensored. But the ones talking about it, so the thing about big tech is, and social media platforms is, in a country where mainstream media is being censored so brutally, where independent journalists don't have a voice, social media has helped democratize their opinion, has given you a place without gatekeepers, right? So in that sense, we started out using Facebook and Twitter to amplify our stories because mainstream media was not carrying it. But now, with this new IT Act and this decision for the government to remove content which it does not seem suitable, I think it's just big tech saying yes to every fascist tendency that exists, and it is in collusion. So tomorrow, if there is an ethnic cleansing of a minority, big tech is as complicit.
Mm. I mean, I can keep talking with you, and I know I have so much to ask of you, but I think we should wrap there, talking of in the sense looking at how we have these two bullies and we have a major problem at our hand. But before you go, and Rana, you've always spoken with great courage that I really admire. And can I also add a few points to people who are listening? One, Free Press Coalition has termed Rana one of the world's 10 most urgent cases of journalists under attack, twice in 2021, once in 2022. The United Nations special rapporteurs have intervened many times and have issued warnings, including saying that her life was at serious risk. So whatever side of the political spectrum you might be on, and criticism of a sort of a journalist's work is fair, but harassment, bullying, threats to life are on a totally different plane. And I ask you today, usually I don't do this in these videos, but I ask you today to summon some compassion and really think a government that allows and pushes for hate and violence, and social media platforms like Facebook that enable this, is that a place that you, me, or anyone really wants, or more importantly, should want? And yeah, I will give you the last word, Rana.
I have honestly, when I'm giving the last word, I wonder because we should always have the last word and give some words of optimism and talk about hope, right? Talk about hope in these grim times. But my last word is only probably a word of caution for tech companies to redeem themselves until they get to a point where they will be beyond redemption. And I hope that their conscience just wakes up someday and say and understand that this is not just for this generation but for generations to come, that we are leaving behind a prejudiced, hateful world, and big tech cannot absolve itself. Because when history is being written, I hope big tech comes across as one of the biggest players in giving us one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world, and in the hateful place that we are in the world right now as a civilization. I think I think big tech needs to know that when history is being written, their role will be written in very dark words.
Thank you, Rana. Absolute pleasure again. Thank you so much.
Likewise. Thank you, Mansa. Thank you for having me.